feel that's beneficial for you when you're looking for your forms, or you can change them. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to keep it simple and I'm going to leave it at test. Okay. You also have the option to put a description of your form. However, don't feel the need to do that. That's completely optional. Below is where you're going to start creating your questions. So you'll see here untitled question. Over here to the right, you'll see a drop-down box, and this will give you a selection of different types of questions that you can choose from. Now, when we get into talking about forms as quizzes, I'll get into talking about specific types of questions you're going to want to create, because those are the types of questions that are going to allow themselves to have answer keys, which will allow Google to do the grading for you. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to do a quick multiple choice question. And I'm just going to say, what is 1 plus 1? Okay. Below, I'll put my answers. So I'm going to 3, 5, 7, and 2. Okay. And there I have it, my first question. All right. Now, if I want to add additional questions, over here on the right, you'll see this plus sign and add question. I can go ahead and click that, and it will add additional questions below. I also have the ability to import questions. So these will be questions that I have used from previous forms. This is great for saving time, because if you're using similar questions, all you have to do is change a word or two from a previous form and you're all set to go. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. As teachers, you're limited on time, so any little tips or tricks that I can give you like that, that'll help save time, I'll make sure to throw in there. Okay, adding title and description. So if you want to give this question a specific title or description other than what's been listed above, you're welcome to do so by clicking these two T's. You can add an image here to questions, which is fabulous if you're, say for example, a social studies teacher or a science teacher. I've had many teachers that have put diagrams or images in and then asked a question for the students about the image that they were viewing. Videos, wonderful tool, and I'm going to show you how we can use them later on to differentiate instruction. And then we're going to get into more details about adding sections, but just know that if you add a section, it will be a different part of the form. So you'll have questions, and then your questions will relay to the next section, but we'll get into more detail about that later. So that's just a general overview of the form itself. Up at the top, you do have some customizing options. Here you customize the theme, which means you can have a selection of pictures that you can choose from. So you'll click this little paint palette, and then you'll click the words choose image. And then you have images here already pre-selected for you that you can design your form. So a lot of teachers color code their forms based on their classes, or maybe you want a picture that best relates to the subject that you're teaching. So for example, if you were an art teacher, you might want to select the pencils. And now you'll see that everything has color coordinated to meet your theme. This eyeball icon up here is going to give you a preview of what the form will look like. So when your students take the form, this is what they'll be seeing. This is great for you to just make sure everything's formatted correctly, everything looks okay before you go ahead and send out the link. Up here are some share settings, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about those in a few moments. And then your send option will allow you to send out the form, but again, we'll get into that later in the webinar. Bring it back to my slide deck here. Okay, so just quickly to review what we just looked at in live view, we talked about different types of questions that you can add. We also talked about adding your question here on the untitled question. One thing I did forget to mention is this add other option. So if you have a question and it's multiple choice and you have your four answers, but you want an add other, this will allow your students to type in a different response than what you have listed. So if there's something else that you want them to be able to put in other than what you have listed, you can go ahead and type it in there. Okay. We briefly talked about how to edit your questions. So I just kind of went ahead and bulleted all of those different icons that I just walked through with you. A couple I did forget to mention is this here, number 6, which looks like two two documents almost. So this is just adding a copy of the existing question. So again, if there's a question and it's very similar to what you already have listed, you can copy the question and then just change a word or two, or maybe change a couple numbers, and then you won't be starting from scratch. You won't be reinventing the wheel. Again, huge time saver. If the question ends up being something that you don't want to use, this trash can icon here will allow you to eliminate the question altogether, delete it. By sliding this bar over, the circle over here next to required, you will be requiring your students to answer the question. That means they cannot submit the form until they have answered this question. So if it's a quiz that you're working on and you're going to want to make sure that your students are answering certain questions, it's great to have them required, because those are something that the students will need to answer prior to moving on. Okay. And then number 9 will give you a couple of different options, which we'll get into in a few moments. Okay, so let's talk about some general settings that you're going to see in forms. So I'm going to go back to the form view. And I'm going to click this little gear icon up here, and this is going to bring me to my form settings. So we're going to start by talking about this general tab, the general settings. So the first thing that you see here is the ability to collect email addresses. Now, some forms you may want to be anonymous. So a lot of times surveys may be anonymous because you want people to be truthful. However, if you're assessing students, and I don't know about you, but my students always forgot to put their name on things, collecting email addresses is a wonderful way to keep track of who's submitting their work and who belongs to which form. You can also restrict who has access to your form. So right now I can restrict it so that only users in the Mohawk Regional Information Center have access to my form. If I want anyone in the region to have access, I can unclick this, and anyone with a link now can access my form. I can also limit it to one response for my form. So if it's a quiz, I don't necessarily want my students going in and submitting 2 or 3 answers. I want one answer just to get an assessment on what they know and what they don't know, so that I can better help them. So I would limit it to one response, so my students are submitting at one time and then they no longer have access to the form. I can also choose if I want my students to be able to edit after they submit, or see a summary chart and text responses, so they would be able to see the other responses students have added. Okay, let's go into the presentation settings now. Now these are the settings that your students are going to be seeing as they move through the form. So the first thing that you're going to see is the progress bar. So this is going to show your students how far along in their quiz they are, or in their form. So if they're halfway through, that progress bar will show them that they're halfway through. For some students, that might be a distraction. Others, it may be a help. So it's up to you as a teacher to decide what you feel would be beneficial, but I do want to make you aware that this is an option. Also, love this option, shuffle question order. If you have 2 students sitting side by side taking a same quiz, you don't want them seeing the same questions. If you choose shuffle question order, it will shuffle around the order in which the questions appear. So student A may see question 1, where student B may be seeing question 5. Wonderful way to make sure that you're getting true, authentic data when your students are taking assessments. Again, show link to submit another response. Excuse me, I apologize. Oh my goodness. This is if you would like your students to be able to submit a second time. Again, for quizzes, this may not be your best option, but use your best judgment. And your confirmation message is going to be what your students see once their form has submitted. So you might just want to say, thank you for submitting your quiz, thank you for your hard work, whatever you feel would be beneficial. You don't even have to include a message if you don't feel it would be needed. Okay, Brittany, any questions so far? We're doing good? All right, awesome. So we're going to move in now to talking about Google Forms for quizzes. So I want to specifically start talking about the quiz settings. So you're going to find that right under the settings tab, still where we are, but now you'll see a quizzes tab. First thing you're going to see is make this a quiz. That allows you to assign point values and answer keys to your questions. So by sliding this over, now I have the ability to add point values and answer keys to my questions. So I'm going to leave that there, and we'll go back in a moment and see what that looks like on the other end. One great feature that a lot of teachers like, and it's newer to Google, is this lock mode on Chromebooks. By clicking on this, if my student is taking the assessment on a Chromebook, like form, they are not able to pull up any other tab other than the form. So once the form is pulled up, all other tabs are disabled until that form is submitted. Therefore, students are not Googling or looking up any other answers on any tabs. They are limited to just that. Those types of questions will be completed in your thing. So do you want them to see what questions they've missed, what questions were correct, and the point values for each question? So these make the form customizable to you and your students based on their needs. I'm going to go ahead and click Save to those settings. And now we can take a look at my form as a quiz. So you'll notice up here that automatically it's telling me that your lock mode is on. So only respondents using managed Chromebooks can open this quiz. Okay. So if my students are using a Chromebook, they are not able to open any other tabs. They're limited to just this form. Okay, this form is automatically collecting email addresses for the MORIC users. Now, down here, I have my questions. So I'm going to click on my first question, what is 1 + 1? Maybe. Let me refresh and see if that helps. Give me just a moment. Apologize. Wi-Fi is so much fun. Let's try that again. Turned on. Let's try it again. I apologize. There we go. Okay, bring up my test. Okay, there we go. Now I can edit. All right, so my settings have all remained the same, and that's the other thing I love about Google Forms is you don't have to save anything. So if your Wi-Fi does drop and you're left in the middle of a form that you have completed, everything saves for you automatically. And you can have access to it anywhere you want. So I know all of you want to sit home on a Friday night and create quizzes. You're able to do that with Google Forms. All right, so moving on. I have my first question, what is 1 + 1? I have this blue button that now appears called Answer Key. This wasn't there before quizzes, before I turned this into a quiz. But if I click on this, I can go ahead and choose the correct answer. So what is 1 + 1? The answer is 2. You'll notice that I have selected 2 by this green line and then this green check mark. I can also assign the point value that I would like for this question. So I'm going to assign this just 1 point. And what's great about this is if it's a harder question or a deeper level thinking question, I could assign more points. All of my questions do not have to be worth the same amount of points. I can also add feedback for my students. This is what I love. So incorrect answers, I can give my students tips or tricks on how they could improve their answer, but it gets even better because I can attach video. So if you take a look at this icon here, I can click on that icon and I can search YouTube for videos. So if I wanted addition strategies, go ahead and search for those. And all types of videos come up for addition strategies. So now when my students are taking my quiz and they get the question wrong, they can be prompted with a video that would reteach the skill to help them move forward in their learning. If you have a specific video in mind and you already have the URL, you can also enter that by clicking URL and just copying and pasting the link into the box. You can also provide a link here for your students. So if there's a website you want them to check out, or again, another video you have with just the link, enter it here and your students can receive this. Now the same is true for correct answers. And what I like about the video here with correct answers is it's fun to add little videos in here that might be cheering the students on for getting the correct answers. So it's a great motivation strategy just to keep your students engaged and excited about what they are learning and making them feel good as they're moving through their quizzes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit my question again because, as I said earlier, I have this required bar here. I'm going to make sure that I turn that on because I want my students to answer these questions before they're able to submit the form. So this is the question that I want to make sure that my students are answering prior to completing their form, because this might be one of the standards that I'm assessing them on. Okay. Okay. Last thing I want to show you, and then we're gonna move on from quizzes as long as there's no questions, is this shuffle option order. So I talked earlier about how you could shuffle the order of questions. You also have the option to shuffle the order in which the answers appear. So I could have what is 1 plus 1 on 2 different screens, but the answers could appear in very different orders. So this screen could have 3, 5, 7, 2, whereas this screen over here could have 5, 7, 2, and 3. So it just shuffles that order of the answers that you've provided. Again, providing that true realistic data from your students. Okay, so let's go back to the slide deck. We talked about this, so I'm just going to quickly again recap, and I'm going to include a link to this slide deck at the end of our webinar, just so you can go back and review any notes or any questions that you might have had throughout the webinar. So we talked about how you can collect email addresses from your students. You can show responses from, apologize. Okay. We talked about response receipts, restricting your users to just your school so no other students have access, limiting it to 1 response per student. Again, that's great for assessments because you don't want your students to go in and edit any changes. Editing after submission, same thing. And then the summary charts and text responses. So if you want your students to be able to see other people's answers, that's available. We also talked about the presentation settings. So we talked about the progress bar, so knowing where they are in their quiz and how far they have to go. Shuffling the question order, showing a link to submit another response. So again, allowing your students to add more than one response, and the confirmation message that they will receive once they've submitted their form. Okay. We're good so far? We're good so far? No questions? Okay. Okay. All right, moving on then, we talked again about the quiz settings. So we talked about lock mode on Chromebooks, which is a great feature if your students are 1-to-1 and they have Chromebooks. They are locked down to that form and they are not going anywhere until that form is completed. It's also not only for the wandering eye factor, but it's great to make sure that your students are staying on task. Because I know even as an adult, I get easily distracted. I could be watching something on TV, but I'm quick to pick up my phone and just scroll without even thinking twice about being distracted by another form of input. So here, limiting it to just 1 input is really getting your students to focus on the task at hand. Okay. We also talked about how you can release grades and allow your students to see any missed questions they might have had. Okay, we then talked about how to create an answer key, which again, this needs to be in quiz form in your settings before you can create answer keys. But as soon as you turn that into a quiz, that blue answer key icon will come up and you can go ahead and click on that, and then you can start answering your answers into the answer key and adding that feedback. Which again, wonderful way to differentiate and provide that extra help for students that may need it with videos or links. And the wonderful thing about this is no one has to know, because it looks like all of your students are doing the same quiz. So no one knows if students are getting redirected to a website or to a video prior to finishing the next question. So it's a great way for the students to get that help they need, but still feel as if they are all receiving the same information and the same instruction. Okay, we didn't talk about that. So let me go back to Google Forms and just touch on this. This is why I have a slide deck, to keep me on track, because sometimes I get a little confused. So I'm going to change from multiple choice now to short answer. And you'll notice that now I no longer have my choices, I just have a short answer text. Okay, this is a required text. I can go ahead and mark my question. Now in this case, I can add a correct answer too. However, in some other cases, you may be looking for specific words, specific text. It may be a longer. So that while the short answer, you can make correct answers, okay? I caution you that if it is a lengthy sentence or lengthy description that you're looking for, that you go back and you just review it yourself to make sure that the information you're receiving as far as grading is accurate. Okay, so that is all there. Now I'm going to click on these three dots over here and we're going to talk about response validation. So the response validation is going to give you an option to choose how you want your students to be answering. So you have the choice from number, text, length, or regular expression. So if I put a number in and I have greater than, less than, equal to, etc., I'm going to say equal to, and then the number 2. So if my students put in any answer that is not equal to the number 2, they would get this message. Try again. Okay, so that's just another way to validate what you're seeing. So again, it works great for short 1-word or 2-word answers, but if you're getting into the lengthiness of a multi-word sentence, you may want to just go in and just double check what it is that your students have answered to make sure that you're getting the appropriate information. So again, that was found under the 3 dots, and I just clicked response validation. I'm going to go back, and this is again in the slide deck, so if you have questions about this, the information is found right here, and then I've included a screenshot so you can see exactly where to find that step. Okay, we also talked about adding feedback. So we talked about in your answer key how you can add feedback for incorrect and correct answers, both with words, text, or links, or videos. Okay, so now the fun part, differentiating with Google Forms. And before we get started, Brittany's going to enter a link. Okay. And I just want you to quickly click on that link and try out a form that I've created that shows the differentiation, because I want you to get a sense of what that looks like before we actually dive into talking about it. So I'll give you a few moments. It's just a fun little form, nothing serious, but just so you can get a sense of what it looks like. Oh, yes.
It's about questions being read aloud, like tests by the students. So I said like highlighting and like right-clicking, how you can turn on that feature with Chromebook. Yes. But they sound robotic. So I said that the audio feature is coming to Google Slides soon, hopefully. So maybe they'll add it into Forms, but that's all we have for now. Perfect. So I didn't know if you had another option that you could share, but that's all I know.
No, nothing that's not paid for.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll give you another moment to finish that up. So what you should be seeing on your form is just a fun little survey about your favorite food. So if you chose your favorite food was ice cream, you were going to be asked what type of ice cream then. If you chose, I forget my other choices, but the point is, toppings, thank you. This is why I have a teammate. So the point is, once you've answered that question, based on your answer, you were redirected to another type of question. You wouldn't have answered that your favorite food was, say, a hamburger, and then I asked you what your favorite flavor was, because that wouldn't make sense. So what I've done is I've branched within a Google form to allow my answers to drive my instruction. So we're going to take a look at what that means and how that works in forms. And over here, you'll just see a quick little snapshot of branching. So if you answered question 1, A or B, these were incorrect, and I would send you somewhere to a link or a video or an easier question that would allow you to review the skill. However, if you answered question C, that was the correct answer, I would move you along to question number 2, which would be increasingly harder, or maybe would focus on another part of that standard that I have taught, and so on and so forth. So again, wonderful way to differentiate your instruction because everyone appears to be taking the same quiz, but what they don't know is their quiz is adjusting based on their abilities. And a lot of the intervention programs that we put our students on do this automatically, but it's a great feature for you to be able to do to just add that additional support for your students. It also helps you to see what questions your students have answered because you can really narrow that focus on where your students need help by searching for those questions that they were branched to those incorrect sections. And then later on, when you're in small group or one-on-one, you can really add that extra instruction that that student needs. Okay, so let's just talk quickly then. So again, branching in Google Forms will send a student to a different page based on a question or how they answer. So for example, if a student answers incorrectly, they can be taken to a review video and they can be given a chance to answer the question again. So here's a video, take a look. Now what do you think the answer might be? If they still get it wrong, then you know that student is really not understanding the information and that's something that you want to make sure that you're going over with them. Okay? We're going to talk about how to add these options in, and I'll show you a live view. But again, I just wanted you to get an understanding of what branching is before we start creating it. Okay. Also, you can enable branching for multiple choice or drop-down questions by selecting the Go to Answer section based on answer. So we'll talk about that. But please know that this is limiting in the types of questions that you're asking based on going to a section based on answer. So it is limiting in multiple choice or drop-down questions, and it's not available for short answer or long answer. So it's great for, an end of the week quiz to just assess what you've talked about. It could be a great exit ticket. It could be a great bell ringer. So there's a lot of different options you have as a teacher just by having this available to you. And the wonderful thing about this is it may take some time to set up in the beginning because it can be a little tricky to organize it all. But once it's done, it's done. You're not having to recreate it year after year because it's already set for you. And next year, when you have a new group of students, you can just edit the questions to better fit their needs, but you're not having to start from scratch. Okay, so let's take a live view at this and how we can go about branching. So I'm just going to stick with my test that I have here just to make it simple. You're welcome to start a new one. You're welcome to stay with what you've already used, whatever you're comfortable with. But I have my multiple choice. I'm going to change this back to multiple choice. And I'm going to put my random answers in again. And 7. Okay. Works, right? All right. So now what I'm going to do is I need to create a new section. This is going to be where my students go if they get the question correct. So here I have this symbol that looks like almost an equal sign that says add section. I'm going to add that. And now you'll see I have section 2 of 2. And I'm just going to label this section 2. And maybe you label yours, lesson 3, lesson 4. So you know that this first question came from lesson 1, but maybe this one comes from lesson 3. However you want to word it, I'm just keeping it very simple for this demonstration. So then I'm going to put my question here. So this one was 1 plus 1. Pretty simple. I'm going to bump it up a little bit. Let's do 12 plus 12. Okay. And I'll do 24, 56, 35, and 44. So now I have 2 different sections. I need to create a third section. So again, I'm going to hit the equal sign. And instead of untitled section, I'm going to title this section 3. So I know that section 3 is where my students are going to go if they need additional support. So I'm going to add my question. So I have what is 1 plus 1? I might do what is 2 plus 2, keeping with those simple same facts. Okay, so 3, 4, 7, 9. Okay. So now I have 3 different sections. This is my first section, which I originally started with. Section 2, which is where they're going to go if they get the question right, because it got a little bit harder. And then Section 3, which will be my final section if my students get the question incorrect. Okay, I'm going to click back on this question now to edit it. Because at the bottom, I'm going to click on these 3 dots, and I'm going to choose the Go To section based on answer. Okay, now you'll notice that next to each answer, I have a little drop down. So it says Go to Next Section, Continue to Next Section. Okay, and again, just to review, my next section is if they got this answer correct. So I'm going to find the correct choice, which is 2, and I want to keep that as Go to Next Section. However, for my other questions, I'm going to choose Go to Section 3. And you'll notice when I click that drop down that I can go to any of the sections that I have completed, or I can submit my form. So I'm going to go to Section 3 for all of the incorrect choices. So now if my students get the question incorrect, they will be redirected to what is 2 plus 2. They won't even see this what is 12 plus 12 because this is above their ability at this time. That's fine. That's where they're at. And that's the most important thing, is that we're meeting our students where they're at. And this allows us to do just that. Okay? I have it required, so they have to answer. And I can do the same thing down here. So I can go ahead, I'm going to click Answer key. And 12 plus 12 is 24. That's my correct answer. I'll make this worth 1 point. Okay. Oh, I apologize. Didn't make this a required question. Now I'm going to say that's it for my exit ticket today. So I'll do Go to Section based on answer. And if they get the question correct, they'll submit the form. If they get it incorrect, I'm going to have them try out section number 3 to see if they truly understand those facts, or if they had a lucky answer the first time. And then down here, I'll do the same thing. I'll add my answer key. Question 4 is the correct answer. Edit my question, make it required. And I'm just going to have them submit form once they're done with all of these. Okay. Everything okay?
There was a problem with the link, so we wanted to address that.
Oh.
It wouldn't show up in the chat.
Oh.
So they didn't get a chance to view it. It showed that it was sending on my end, but they couldn't see it, which was weird. It was like ghost, not there.
Is it there now?
No.
Okay.
But we will try and add it in the description after.
Okay.
And maybe they can see it that way, or we can email it to them so they can see after.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I've just been informed that you were not able to see the link. I apologize for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add it into the description of the webinar after, or we will email the link out to you just so you can get a taste for what it feels like as a student to do a branching quiz. Again, it's just a fun quiz. It's nothing serious, but it's good for you to see what the students are seeing, because then you know how best to set it up, because you know what will work best for your students. Okay? Okay, so my test is done. I've got my 3 questions. I'm ready for my exit ticket. But before I give it to my students, I just want to preview it to make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to click on this eye icon here. Oh, it won't let me because I'm not on a Chromebook. So let me go to my settings, and I'm going to take that off. Okay, and I can turn that back on after. But I want to make sure. So what is 1 plus 1? If I answer correctly, I should get brought to the question 12 plus 12. I did. Now if I answer this correctly, I should submit my form. I did. Great, that works. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and now I want to try to answer incorrect to make sure that my branching worked correctly. So I'm going to answer 3 for what is 1 plus 1. I'm going to click Next, and now I've been brought to section 3, what is 2 plus 2. If I answer this correctly, I will be able to submit. Okay, so I'm going to go through the slides and just recap the steps that we took. And then, as I said, you'll have these directions here. I know that I'm going through this pretty quickly. An hour is not a lot of time, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview so that you're able to take this information and directly implement it into your classroom to better help you as a teacher with your time and your efficiency with getting student data and helping your students to the best of your ability as well. Sorry. So yes, I just wanted to give you something you could directly implement into your classroom tomorrow, okay? All right, even if it's something very simple, even 3 questions, that would be my advice. Start small. Don't take a whole quiz and try to branch it out because that could be very overwhelming. Start with something small like an exit ticket or bell ringer with a couple of questions that you can easily branch out so that you get used to the process yourself, but then also that your students get used to how they're being asked questions, and then you can branch out from there. A lot of times when I was in the classroom, I would come away with all these wonderful ideas and I just wanted to implement everything right away. Well, that caused me to just end up getting burnt out, and then I was no good to anyone because I just couldn't handle all of the information coming in. Instead, if I started small with 1 or 2 things, I could have built from there. So just personal advice, you know yourself best, but just throwing that out there. Okay, so let's take at our steps that we just completed. We started by creating our first question, which had to be a multiple choice or a drop down question. And then we went to those 3 dots, and you can see them. Oh, there's my daughter. Isn't she cute? All right. So then you went to the 3 dots here, and you chose go to section based on answer. Okay. Then you selected the section that you wanted your students to go to based on the answer that they chose. So again, if they got the question correct, you wanted to make those questions a little bit more difficult. And if they got the question incorrect, you want to make those questions a little easier, or maybe provide video or reteaching right there in the question for your students. You also want to make sure that the question was a required question, meaning that your students had to answer it. And finally, optional, but it is available, is to shuffle the answer options. Okay. And then this was what we used to add a section. So after we got the section set up, we got our questions set up, we were ready to go with our quiz, but in order to do that, we had to create additional sections. So you click on that icon here that kind of looks like an equal sign, and you're going to add section. You'll add as many sections as you need. Again, my advice would be to start small. Add a section title and description. Now, you don't have to do a section title, but my advice to you is give it a title that you're going to know where your students are being directed. So when you're selecting what answers are going where, you know, but don't give it something so obvious that your students are led on to what you're doing. So just make it something to help yourself keep track of where your questions are going, but not that it's going to draw students' attention to the fact that they're getting questions right or wrong. Okay, and then you're going to match the sections up based on the answers. Okay. So lastly, I want to talk about sharing your form. So you have your form created, you're ready to go with your quiz. What do you do now? How do you get it to your students? So let's talk about that. Let's go back to our live view. And I exited out of it, so give me 1 minute. So I'm going to go to forms.google.com, and I'll see my test right here. Okay, so we're going to start by going up to this send button here in the corner. And there's a couple different ways that you can share this out. So you can send via email. Now, I know for a school that I'm in that the students don't have access to email, so this would not work. However, maybe this is a form that I want a colleague to try out, so I'm going to email it over to them so they can test it out before my students do. I can go ahead and put their email address in here, write a subject, write a message, and include the form right there in the email so they don't have to go anywhere else. Now, maybe I'm co-teaching with someone and I want them to add to the form as well. I can do that here as well. So if you look at the bottom, you see this word add collaborators. You can choose who you would like to invite. So if I started typing in a person's name, I could give them editing rights. Okay, so that means that that person can go into the form and now they can change anything on that form or they can add to it. So this is wonderful if you're co-teaching. Even I know when I was in 4th grade, my fellow 4th grade teacher and we would collaborate on everything. So maybe I would do the first part of the form, and then she would branch it out and do the second part of the form. It's a great way, again, for time management and splitting up that workload by having collaborators there. And it's a great way to get other people's ideas, because oftentimes, I know for myself, that's where my best ideas come from, is listening to others and what they do in the classroom. Okay? So that is adding collaborators. Now I'm going to go back to that send. I can also choose a link. So if I have a place that I would like to put the link, so maybe a slide deck, maybe a doc, I made a hyperdoc and I want this form included in that hyperdoc, I can get the link here, just clicking on it and hitting copy, and then I can paste it wherever I would like. I can also choose the shorten URL option, and it will shorten that URL for me, so it makes it a much smaller link to share with my students. I can also embed this form somewhere. So a lot of times, I myself use Google Sites, and I like to include forms on my sites. By embedding the form, no one has to click separate links. They're not being brought to a separate page. It's right there in the site. This is great for you as a teacher. If you're creating a unit and you're putting in all the information on sites, you have that form right there, so your students aren't having to go to multiple sources. All of it's a one-stop shop for you, ready to go. So you have that embed link right there. Okay. So that is sharing out your form. Now I want to talk to you about summary of forms. So I'm going to click back to my slide deck, because I want to give you a couple screenshots on what you're going to see once you have responses from your forms. So in your forms, you're going to see up at the top questions and responses. So let me actually go back to show you where that is. I apologize, I'm not trying to give you whiplash. But here you'll see questions and then you'll see responses. Okay, so you can see that you can toggle between the two. Now, when you get your responses, you can view it in a couple of different ways. So let's talk about that. You'll notice here that I can have a summary, which means I can have an overview of the whole class and everyone that has answered. Or, this is what I really like, I can look at individual students. So I can see exactly what each student answered as an individual on the form. Great way to get true data on what my students are understanding. Okay. You'll notice here I've blocked out student names just for sake of privacy, but you'll have the emails responses here to know who has responded. You also have the option to turn off accepting responses. So say you're done with the form and your class is over, you don't want anyone else accessing the form, you shut that off and you're no longer accepting responses from students. Okay? You'll see here that I have a breakdown of the summary. So this is a summary of everyone that has answered and the different choices they chose. So I had 66.7% choose green screen. So this was a form that I put together for teachers on different things that they would like to complete. So I just could get a quick overview of what the most popular options were, and I knew what to provide for teachers. Now, again, for your class, you can see who's getting the most correct responses, and then you know the areas that you need to help fill in the gaps for. Okay? And same thing here. I have a list of responses that teachers have submitted. Okay. So that was the summary responses. Now let's talk about individual responses. And here you'll notice that I have cropped out the below, but if I had a response, you would see exactly the question and exactly the response below response 1. And you'll notice here at the top, 1 of 8, I can toggle between pages. So this is my first student's response. I can hit this over arrow and I can see the next student's response, and so on and so forth. How amazing is that? Is that you're not having to open 18 tabs to view all 18 responses. It's right there for you. So nice. You can also print your students' responses. Great for parent-teacher conferences, IEP meetings, just general overview of what you need to provide for students and making sure that you're holding them accountable. Okay? You can delete responses. So if you think a student's response might have been inappropriate or maybe not their best work, you may want to delete it and then have them try it again. There's that accepting responses toggle again that we talked about. And the last thing that I want to point out on this screen is this little icon here that will organize all of the responses into a Google Sheet. What I love about this is you're going to have all of your responses in a spreadsheet. And what's nice about that is that you're able to filter out the data based on what you want to see. So if you only want to see one question, you can filter that right on the spreadsheet. And you're not losing all of the data. So it really gives you the ability to work with that data that you've collected. So it's not just seeing it on a screen, it's actually getting hands-on and manipulating it and working through it to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. Okay, so if you choose to put it into a Google Sheet, this is what you're going to see. Again, this is just an example that I did, but you can see exactly when your students took the form, so the date and the time. And what I like about that is maybe your students are consistently doing poorly on one assessment, but they're doing well on others. Take a look at the timestamp. Could it be the time of day that your students are taking that assessment? Could it be the week of the day, or the week of, yes, let me try that again. The day of the week that they're taking it. There's so much that you can look into because we know that students are very complex and they have a lot of layers. So having as much information available to us can really help us dive deeper into understanding them. Here's the question that I asked, and then here is the answers that each of the people that responded to my form provided. Okay? Again, question I asked, responses. Email addresses, so I could see exactly who answered what with each question, and then their name. Okay, so that's just a brief snapshot of what your Google form would look like. Of course, it's going to be different based on your questions and based on your students, but I just kind of wanted you to get a visual of what you would be seeing if you chose that spreadsheet option. Okay, you also have an option to how you receive your responses, okay? So you can get email notifications for new responses. So if you want to get an email every time that your form has been submitted, you have the option to do that, okay? You also have the ability to select the response destination. So you can change where your Google Sheet goes to. So if you already have a Google Sheet set up with a name on it, you can select that sheet and you're not having to recreate a new sheet each time. It can all link in together, okay? You can unlink your form, so that means that any responses that are submitted will no longer be tied to that Google Sheet. You can download your responses into a CSV file. So again, great for printing them out. The trouble with a CSV file that you need to keep in mind is that you're not able to edit any of the information. What you see is what you get. So it's great if you want to print it out and have it right there for you, but you're not able to filter any of the data in front of you. So just keep that in mind, okay? Print out all the responses you've received so far, and then delete all responses. So you have a clear sheet. If you're done with it, you don't need the student responses anymore. You're ready to go. Okay. And let me go ahead and show you where you can find those options. Maybe. Why am I not seeing? That's because I'm not on the right page. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Took me a minute. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time, and we're getting close, so I want to make sure I'm finishing up, but I want to make sure I'm giving you all the information too. So to get those choices that I just covered over here in the slide deck, those form response options, you're going to choose the response tab, and then those three dots, you're going to click on those, and then there are all of your options on what you would like to do with the responses. Okay. Okay, so don't want to take up any more time than I need to. Any wrap-up questions that came in through chat?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right. If you have any questions after this, Like I said, we're going to include the link to this slide deck so you have all of the notes. But here is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you just want help getting set up with your first Google form. We'll also include the link for that branched form. I apologize that the link did not work during this webinar. But I want to thank you all for coming. I hope that you found this beneficial. I hope that it's something that you can go ahead and take back to your classroom tomorrow and just try it out with your students. All right. Have a great day. Thank you.